Welcome to the Commerce Tomorrow podcast. Your one stop to learn about the technology that's powering the future of commerce. Here are your hosts, Dirk and Kelly.
Welcome to another episode of the Commerce Tomorrow podcast. I'm your host, Kelly Gage, and unfortunately, my co-host, Dirk, is unable to make it today due to a family situation. Today, I'm very happy to be joined by RJ and Vicki from Akamai. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we begin, can you guys spend a few minutes talking about your backgrounds and how you got to Akamai?
Sure.
So maybe first start with RJ.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Kelly. I'm RJ. My name is Rahul Jain, but in short, you can call me RJ. And I've been in Akamai for about 6.5, 7 years. I started off as a software developer in the industry and moved to Akamai as a solutions architect, after which I I moved the solutions engineering role, and now I lead a team of solutions engineers where we partner and strategize with customers, help understand what do they require from a business perspective, and see how we can accomplish that from a technology perspective. Either using Akamai technologies or otherwise. The idea is to partner with them and see how we can support them.
Very good. And Vicki?
Sure. Hi, my name is Vicki Reyzelman, and I'm a strategic engagement manager with Akamai. I'm responsible for technology strategy and delivery of Akamai services. I have been at Akamai for over 7 years and have spent a total of over 20 in the technology industry across a variety of roles with Deloitte, Yahoo, and Fiserv. All these roles had one thing in common, and that is working with a customer using the best of breed technology, and that is something that I truly enjoy and am passionate about. I in my spare time, I enjoy mentoring others in STEM careers and especially supporting women in technology events and initiatives.
Great. Well, welcome to both of you. So RJ, what is Akamai? Especially for the non-US listeners out there who might not have heard about Akamai as much. Can you give a quick rundown of who you guys are and what types of services you provide?
Absolutely. So, Kelly, let me ask you this question. What is your favorite fruit?
Probably an orange. I just had one this morning for breakfast.
Awesome. Now, let's say you wanted to buy orange, but there were no local stores and you had to go buy them directly from the farm. Would you like that experience on a regular basis?
Maybe once, just to see where the fruit comes from. But yeah, I think I would get that out of my system pretty quick.
Yeah, and might even want to consider changing your favorite fruit at that point, right? If it's not available readily. So let's talk about why that is the case. I can think of at least 4 problems. Every time you wanted to buy orange, it would take a lot of time, right? It would also cause a lot of traffic congestion and pressure on the infrastructure because now everyone is going to the same farm using the same highway, etc. You would also have to wait longer at the farm and be in longer checkout lines because everyone's at the same farm. Last but not the least, what happens if something goes wrong at the farm? Any incident, malicious or accidental, would lead to unfavorable conditions for the business as well as for the buyers.
Right. So in this analogy, you guys would be the grocery store then, right? Bring the oranges out to the edge, right, to the customer.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's what we do is we provide a faster, quicker, safer, and secure online experience to all our customers. So any end user who's trying to browse the internet, we make it faster for them and we make it more secure.
Right. And you do that through your edge, right? So you basically push out all of the content, whether it's static content or dynamic content. And you also allow a lot of execution right at the edge. So, I mean, the processing is happening and serving is happening directly close to the user, right? Is that the basic gist of it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So we are globally distributed, and we are the edge. We created the edge. We started on that journey 20 years ago. So yeah, that's where all the computation and all the logic happens.
Very interesting. So what are some interesting stats, Vicki, on Akamai? So, like how many points of presence do you have? What percent of retailers do you serve? Do you have any interesting stats like that?
Absolutely. So if you think about it, we have over 2,400 networks in over 130 countries, ingesting about 2.5 exabytes of data per year. That's a lot that kind of happens across our networks all around the globe. As 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 countries like Russia and China are coming up with their own networks, Akamai is able to work with those countries as well to serve customers within that country, which also makes us very powerful. So we're international all around the globe, serving customers closest, one mostly one hop away, closest to the edge. So we're able to deliver more than 50 terabits per second of data on a daily basis. And our peak traffic surpasses 100 terabits per second just for last month. So we're continually growing. Our network is secure. Security is a big part of what we deliver. And of course, performance being just one hop away makes it work within any country all around the globe.
Very interesting. And do you have any interesting stats on the number of e-commerce websites you serve and that kind of thing?
Yeah, actually, 19 of the top 20 US e commerce sites are on the Akamai platform, and 8 of the top 10 European e commerce sites are on the Akamai platform.
Interesting. Yeah, that maps pretty closely back with what I've seen. You guys are just about everywhere, but you're kind of the silent partner making everything work behind the scenes. So, no, that's great. And then, do you have any stats on the latency from a typical end consumer to the nearest Akamai point of presence? So you said it's typically one hop, but do you know what the latency is typically?
It's milliseconds. I don't have an exact number that I can provide for that.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Pretty quick though.
I'll add to that. The latency is actually um, overcompensated by the performance gain that we provide. So with all the caching and other routing efficiencies that we create, we actually more than make up for the latency. And in fact, there are SLAs around how much we would make up for it within the US as well as globally.
Hmm. Okay. Makes sense. So all the public clouds out there have their own CDNs, right? So you have AWS with CloudFront, for example. GCP has one. Azure has one. Right? They all have CDNs, and that's what you guys are historically known for, as being a CDN. And I know you do a lot more than that. But how do you differentiate from those offerings?
That's a great question. We're celebrating uh, our 20th anniversary, so I feel like this is a great question to answer. Akamai, essentially created the CDN industry 20 years ago, and we're still a market leader in that aspect by far. However, in these 20 years, we've come a long way. And in addition to being a CDN, our solutions now include security solutions like web application firewall, bot management, and then other solutions like customer identity management, API management, video and image optimizations, etc. So there's a lot more going on in the Akamai layer than any single competitor would be able to offer. And through various different independent research firms like Gartner, Forrester, IDC, etc., they all recognize our solutions as industry leading solutions. And that's because our competitors simply don't have the scale or the reach to serve customers at the edge like we do. And when we treat our customers very very seriously, um, but the reality is that with Akamai being only one network hop away from 90% of world's internet user, just like Vicky mentioned before, we are able to do things that our competitors simply cannot do. And yeah, so that's how we sort of distinguish ourselves from our competitors.
Yeah, I think you guys have always been the first and the biggest, so it helps to have that 20-year plus head start. And I think with the CDN space or application delivery space or however you want to define that, you get huge advantages by being the first to market and having those contracts with the different carriers and things like that. So I think that helps out a lot.
Kelly, I
Um,
think just to add to that, I think that another big thing for Akamai, and I worked with a lot of large companies before, is there is that sense of reliability, right? When I present Akamai products to customers, I can sleep well at night knowing that the product works, that the platform delivers, and then they're going to be happy with the service that they receive from, on the edge. And so as someone who delivers services and has to answer the customers day to day, it's very important for me to be comfortable with that.
yeah, no, that's fair. So there's been a big push, and if you see it with AWS Lambda at Edge, to actually start running code at the edge. So traditionally, you would serve static media from the edge, right? But now there's a big push, like with Lambda at Edge, to actually start executing pieces of your application out at the edge close to customers. What do you have in that space?
So we have several solutions in that space. As we mentioned, Akamai is only one network hop away, so we're very close to each internet user out there. And we have a multitude of offerings, kind of really leveraging that power. One of them is Edge Sites Includes, and it's an older technology, but it still works well in terms of enabling us to piece together the dynamic pages and make sure that we accelerate them across the internet. But the other really new solution that we're working through is Edge Workers. So Edge Workers enables us to execute JavaScript at the edge. And I think that's probably the direct competitor to the AWS solution that you described.
Okay. And how does that work? So do you have like an artifact that you upload to the edge, or is it a snippet of code and it executes it like Lambda, or how does that work?
It's a snippet of code. It's very similar to Lambda. So it's a snippet of code, and you can essentially execute, for example, A/B testing. If you wanted to, redirect certain customers to one experience versus another, that's a great scenario for, executing something like that at the edge. So you don't have to go back to the origin to determine which experience your customer gets. You can do that at the edge using Edge Workers.
Okay. Very cool. So stepping back a little bit, and I've seen this personally, that you guys have shifted from being a CDN, or at least your messaging is more CDN focused, to now being more of a security platform. And if you go to akamai.com, you see security everywhere. How are you keeping your customers safe and secure?
Great question. So yes, security is a critical part of running any business online. So especially for our e-commerce customers, finance customers, even gaming customers, it is very critical to provide an online experience that is secure. And that's why the Akamai Intelligent Edge Security Platform surrounds and protects your entire architecture. So if you think about from a from an end user perspective, there are a couple of endpoints that we need to protect. The important ones being DNS, and then any public endpoint, as well as your origin, right? And Akamai provides our customers with capabilities and solutions to protect all of these effectively at the edge, without them having to make any changes or doing any updates or incorporating any code changes. All of these security solutions are enabled at the edge. So, for example, we provide Kona Kona Site Defender as a solution to protect against application attacks like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, etc. Um, and then similarly, we provide Bot Manager to help manage good as well as bad bots, as well as bots that do credential abuse. And then similarly, we also look at traffic going directly to your origin and are able to scrub that traffic um, using our own data centers and scrubbing centers to make sure that only good traffic reaches your origin. So at the end of the day, we are protecting against attacks without compromising performance. And then we are defending against massive scale attacks, as well as managing new threat landscape, new attacks that are happening around the globe, and updating our solutions to help our customers tackle those tackle those attacks without them having to investing manpower, resources, hours to beef up their security solutions.
Okay. It sounds almost like Google Shield was inspired from what you guys offer. Is that fair? Are the two pretty comparable there?
In terms of like what someone is trying to do, yes, like they're also trying to provide a solution in the cloud. However, the Akamai security suite is a much more sophisticated and advanced security solution. Um, and we see a lot more traffic, and with security, you have to see these attacks in order to come up with solutions to these attacks. And we see 30% of web traffic at any given point. And what we have done is we have converted all of that into security intelligence. And that's why when we look at any of the independent researches, like through Gartner or Forrester, the Akamai security solutions are the leading solutions. Is because they not only provide these solutions, but they're also highly accurate, and have a much more mature sort of data set.
Hmm. Okay. And something you used to hear a lot about was denial of service attacks, especially against the larger retailers out there. And maybe 10 years ago, a lot of them got hit, but you don't really hear of that anymore. And is that just because, and you're used by most of the large e-commerce in the US, is that just because you guys scrubbed that all out at the edge and that you've improved your technology, or have the business models changed? I mean, how is that possible that we don't hear about it anymore? It's amazing, but how?
It is, right? It is amazing. Well, 65% of the 10,000 plus yearly distributed denial of service attacks are actually mitigated by the Prolexic platform, by the Akamai Prolexic platform. And so we have over 18 global scrubbing centers all around the world that can actually mitigate 7.8 terabits per second of capacity of traffic. So you probably don't hear about it because a lot of those attacks are being mitigated before they ever get to the origin to bring down the site. And the other reason is that the technology again is great, and especially during the holidays. As we approach the holidays this year, it's so important to make sure that you do have a technology like Prolexic, or at least a plan for when the disaster strikes, right? Just because we don't hear about those attacks doesn't mean that they don't happen anymore. They actually more attacks that are happening. It's just they're being mitigated. People are being smarter about protecting their sites. And so it's important not to, I guess, relax and not put any protection in place, given how much money we make during the holidays in the
Yeah.
commerce world.
Well, I think what's cool is you guys, especially through Prolexic, you're able to monitor the traffic flowing through the internet, and you can block it at the source as well as the destination. So you can block it at both ends of the attack, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, the largest attack, and they're getting bigger. It's not just the number of attacks, but the scale of the attacks is actually increasing. And on February 28th last year, Akamai experienced a 1.3 terabits per second DDoS attack. And was able to,
Wow.
yeah, driven by the mem cached reflection. And so we were able to mitigate that. And so as you look at the holidays and protecting yourself during the holidays, don't rest on your laurels. Make sure you have a plan in place. And attacks are not going away; they're just getting larger in scale. The good thing is we're keeping up with the attackers and are able to mitigate those at the edge.
Yeah. Okay. Another question I have is, if you look at the internet today, if you look at the web pages are a lot bigger, but they're also packed with all these cookies and tracking scripts. And I mean, there can be 30 or more of these, right? That's very common, which is, from a user standpoint, it's getting pretty annoying, I have to be honest. How do you accelerate all of that so it doesn't slow down the page loading time? And do you offer any ways of managing all of that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
And when does it stop? I mean, it can't just keep going on forever.
We've been looking for the same answer. Like, when does it stop? So the challenge over here is that third parties are usually added on or piled on to the site to like track certain information, which is usually sort of beneficial for the business, or the business needs that information. But what ends up happening is that people forget to remove them once they're done with that exercise, or if they switch to a different provider later on. There's no cleanup effort usually when it comes to third parties, and that's what causes a lot of problems and issues, because these third parties, while they're providing that information, it's not a guarantee on how well are they suited from a security as well as performance perspective. So are the third parties themselves doing any kind of how serious are they about performance, and how serious are they about security? So what ends up happening is it does start impacting performance for our customers, as well as causing security issues for our customers. So what we have done is we have taken steps in both directions to help our customers manage these third parties, particularly JavaScripts, because that's the biggest culprit, um, and help them from a performance and security perspective. So, for example, um, we are able to look at what JavaScripts are flowing through the HTML. So, regardless of whether or not you're directly delivering them through Akamai or not, if your base page is essentially being delivered through us, we look at what JavaScripts are associated with your traffic, and then we'll provide an insight around how those JavaScripts are doing, whether they're loading quickly enough or are they pretty slow. And then we also give you the ability to look at those JavaScripts and how they're performing, and then take action as to whether or not you want to defer the load of these JavaScripts so that they load after everything has loaded already. So that they're not blocking, particularly the ones that are blocking JavaScript, they're not blocking the load of the page. So we do that through what we call Script Manager. We also have the ability to just ask Script Manager to take action once we identify something that is blocking the page for way too long, even though a predefined action hasn't been defined. We are still able to do it on the fly. So that's something that we do from a performance perspective. We're also coming up with something around the security for third-party JavaScripts or even first-party JavaScripts, where we look at what kind of JavaScripts are again associated with the customer's homepage or any page for that matter, and see are there any known vulnerabilities for these JavaScripts out there, and then take actions accordingly. So providing protection against JavaScripts. There are other simple things that we do. For example, we can pre-connect to third parties as well. So even though the traffic is not directly being delivered through us, we would at least do the DNS resolution and TLS handshake ahead of time using pre-connects.
Okay, very cool. And I want to spend a minute about edge side includes. That was always something I liked to use, but that was like 15 years ago.
Right.
It's a really long time ago. Are you guys still doing that? Like, I know you guys pioneered that, but maybe you could spend a minute and explain what ESIs are and what the current status is of them.
Absolutely. So a lot of our customers do still use it. And ESI is essentially just dynamic content assembly, right? And it offers a lot of advantages, um, for example, for personalization and page fragmentation. Allows us to essentially stitch the page, kind of break it apart, and then stitch it together at the edge. So, for example, as websites become a lot more personalized and the content is more dynamic, you can take pieces of that site, and for example, the static part can be cached much longer than the site that might have your name in it, which we consider the dynamic side of the page. So allowing you to still offer better performance across the board for that page experience. So it allows essentially for us to let's talk about the product detail page. When you go and you take a look at the product, there could be things like product description, which doesn't really change day to day. It's pretty static in terms of what content it has. But then there are things like prices or availability that actually change on an ongoing basis. So by using the ASI technology, we're still able to improve the performance on the page by essentially storing the description for much and caching it for much longer periods of time, and then dynamically generating and stitching the page with the offers and the prices and the availability information, is providing an overall better experience for the customer.
Okay. Very cool. Next, I want to talk about commerce a little bit more specifically, although I guess all this applies to commerce. But we really see that commerce is shifting from these big monolithic legacy platforms to small microservices fronted by APIs. And we've also gone headless as an industry. So the front end is decoupled from the back end. The front end typically being some JavaScript-based front end. But it's all API calls from the front end to the back end, or even GraphQL in some cases. What are some of the implications of that from a network standpoint, and how do you guys solve that?
From a network standpoint, can you clarify that, Ask?
Yeah, so if you're making to render any page, you have to make calls from the front end, which is decoupled from your back end. And we have a lot of customers who will run their front ends in AWS and their back ends on us in GCP, for example. And you'll see a lot of on-prem running the legacy commerce platform, but then the front end will be deployed to GCP, right? So you've got your front end decoupled from your back end, and every time you want to render something, you have to make a request.
Got it. Okay, yeah, makes sense. So it is a trend. So that you're right. There is a big push to move everything to microservices, and the reason is because APIs are lightweight, right? So in order to make an API call, the response is pretty small. So you make incremental API calls instead of making one big call that delivers you HTML, CSS, JavaScript, etc. So you do that once, and then everything that changes as the user progresses on the site using API calls. And that way, the idea is to make it faster. The problem is how do you the problem is that there is an issue of scalability as well as an issue of management. So these APIs can grow pretty quickly because every team is now writing their own APIs. And so how do you manage all of this? And how do you how do you make it secure as well? So that's where Akamai comes into picture, where we provide, irrespective of the origin. So in your example, you provided this backend is AWS, and then the front end is, let's say, GCP. So regardless of the origin, Akamai can be put in front, and it can it can it can support these API calls. It can even cache them. It can accelerate them. But more importantly, we can also manage these APIs using Akamai's API gateway. So that includes just basically importing your APIs into a common central location, and then adding rules around caching, security, so we can look at not only the request that is coming in, but we can also look at the JSON or XML payload and provide protection against application-based attacks for APIs. We can also do things like throttling and rate controlling these API calls. So there's a lot that we can do with APIs. What is also cool is that we've also figured out a way to cache GraphQL requests, and that's kind of unique to the Akamai platform. So there's a lot that we can do with APIs and how we can manage and secure them.
All right, next question. For the non-US listeners, what is Black Friday and Cyber Monday? It seems that these originated in the US because of Thanksgiving, but now it seems that these things have been exported culturally elsewhere. And also, what types of spikes do you see in traffic from the US versus elsewhere?
So Black Friday is the Friday after Thanksgiving holiday. So this year it actually falls on November 28th. And the Cyber Monday is the Monday after that Friday, so Thursday. So essentially it falls on December 2nd this year. And those are major shopping days, not just for the United States, but also in other kind of English speaking countries like Australia, Great Britain, and Canada are also seeing spikes during that time. They represent as much as 30% of all the revenue a retailer might make that year. And it continues to grow. One of the trends that we actually are seeing in the last few years is that more and more of the traffic is moving to mobile devices. So people are shopping more online during that time. So you can shop anywhere you are from your device. And the other trend we're seeing is actually that that the whole month of November and the first 2 weeks of December are really peak periods as well. So while those 2 days are much larger in scope and should be still paid attention to, the promotions that retailers run actually start much earlier in the month.
Okay. Um, and given the rapid spikes in traffic, what do you do internally to prevent outages? I know a lot of retailers, for example, do code freezes. They'll do extra stress testing. They'll do extra security testing. What do you guys do to make sure that you don't have any issues?
So absolutely. So we start our essentially disaster recovery planning and planning for the holidays usually in the summertime. That's when I see a lot of a lot of retailers really start their planning. And what that means is you have to start kind of running load testing, usually 150% and upwards of your peak traffic, to make sure that your systems are prepared to handle that additional load. You also have to look at security. So are you protecting yourself against the DDoS attacks that we described? Are you also looking at any additional rules that you have to put in place as part of your firewall configuration? And most importantly, just having a communication plan in place. So as you are working with different customers, make sure that your maintenance pages are up to date, that you have clear communication, that if something does happen, that your customer doesn't just end up seeing like a 404 error screen. And most important, I think, is to have a backup plan. And so the backup plan would be essentially having a way for you to prioritize the traffic from the customers that are shopping and have shopping carts in progress versus those that might be just browsing on your site. And we have a product called visitor prioritization, and essentially that's what it does, is it determines that if there is an outage or your systems are struggling with the amount of traffic you're receiving, you can actually allow the customers that have something in their shopping cart to continue to shop and complete their transactions, and those that might be browsing can be presented with waiting room experience. It could be a game, a promotion, or something else that's a little more interactive. And again, it's all about providing the right kind of experience for your customers during this peak time, and essentially ensuring that you collect as much of that revenue, holiday revenue, as you can.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And what type of monitoring do you recommend that customers employ?
So we have something, for real user monitoring. We have a product called Impulse, and essentially that product allows you to see how your actual customers, what experience they're having on the site. So monitoring that. And then the other thing I think people sometimes miss out is they try to improve performance across their entire site. But what needs to happen is, using real user monitoring, you need to understand your customer workflow and to ensure that you're really focusing on the pages where the customer will be spending most of their time. So for example, we know that most customers search for their products. So you want to make sure that your search is optimized as much as possible. And one of the things that we do is you can kind of pre-build those lists, those search result lists for the top products that your customers will be searching for. So that list doesn't have to be dynamically generated and can be displayed as quickly as possible to allow your customer to find the product they're looking for in the quickest manner. So spending your time on search, homepage, and of course, are some of the things that are really, really critical.
Okay.
And just to add to that, when we talk to our customers around holiday, we like to take an end-to-end approach. So all the way from the browser to the origin. So Impulse, for example, provides a lot of metrics around the front end as well as the middle mile. So what is happening at the browser, as well as, let's say, what's happening at the Akamai layer. It provides mostly metrics around performance, um, as well as any metrics around the business like conversion rates, etc. So it's important to get that set up, but also making sure that you are getting real-time reporting about your origin. So we do talk to our customers and make sure that they have that set up using whatever tools necessary. We also have reporting set up around security. So you have the ability to set up alerts and reports for any security related events. And these alerts and reports can be set up at the Akamai layer. And these are real time reports as well. So it's important to get those established as well. And we can provide alerts around, let's say, any incident that happens around application security or bot management, etc. We can also provide log lines in an aggregated form or just raw log lines to their origin, and they can be consumed at whatever origin log aggregation tool that they might be using, for example, Splunk. So there are a couple of options over there to help customers get a understanding end to end, all the way from the browser level to what's happening at the origin.
Hmm. Okay. And why is it, just generally stepping back a little bit, why is it that you don't hear of Black Friday, Cyber Monday outages anymore? I mean, you used to hear about them all the time. And the number of people shopping online, I would argue a lot of the whole Black Friday phenomenon has moved online. So we have more traffic, a lot more traffic,
Yeah.
yet we have fewer outages. And is that just a function of us as an industry getting our act together and we all know how to do Black Friday now after having done it for 15 years? Or,
I think
you
Yeah,
know,
so. I think
that's
it's absolutely right. It's customers used to kind of maybe not spend as much time preparing, and now we see people start preparing much earlier in the season. So summertime is really when preparations begin, and there's a lot more load tests are being done. But also I think the technology, right, overall has improved. So in terms of how much throughput we can handle, and how a lot of commerce sites are on hybrid origins, right? Where they might be using cloud, and then there could be accelerating on top of that with Akamai being closer to the edge. So it's the technology, I think, and just preparation are what allowing the holidays to be much more impactful every year.
yeah. Do you have any final recommendations on preparing for Black Friday, Cyber Monday? I mean, given how important it is, given how much revenue is made over this period of time, I mean, obviously it's very important. Do you have any thoughts on how people can avoid getting fired?
yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the uh, best recommendations that we have is to start early and to partner with all your partners, all your vendors early on. Akamai loves to partner with customers starting in the summer and making sure that we are preparing for the biggest event for our customers. So whether it be around security readiness or performance readiness, or even things like load testing, as well as monitoring any solutions. Um, we love to partner with our customers and make sure that we are ahead in the game. Uh, Typical exercises include, from a security perspective, like identifying which endpoints are out there and what all we need to protect. And from a performance perspective, coming up with KPIs, coming up with metrics that we want to focus on, and see which pages, for example, impact those KPIs the most from a conversion perspective. And then focusing on those and helping our customers accelerate that experience. So yeah, the biggest thing that we can do is start early on and identify what we want to achieve.
Okay. No, I think that's great advice. Vicky, any final thoughts?
Absolutely. I mean, I think to be successful during the holiday season, it takes planning, right? And what we're seeing more and more is to make sure that you plan for all the conditions that could possibly happen. It doesn't mean that you'll, essentially execute those plans, but the more prepared you are, the better. So having a disaster recovery plan in place, having a communication plan, security, plan in place around what your team will do if an attack happens. So who will be called? How will they communicate? What is the messaging that you will provide your customers? All those things might seem extreme in many ways, but they will actually allow you to have a peace of mind and not, not to have anyone fired, right? And most importantly, don't forget about those systems that we don't think about a lot when we think about the holidays, like the government tax system, right? We nobody likes taxes, but it's something that we have to impose on products when we sell them. So we need to make sure that we're also load testing with that system in mind, and many others that might be touching our e-commerce site but are not a direct part of it. So make sure that you have a plan all around, and you'll have a great holiday.
Okay, very good. Great final thoughts there. So thank you again both for sharing your thoughts. It's really great to hear about this from the folks who are actually out there keeping everything up and running over Black Friday and Cyber Monday. And I think we all appreciate the behind the scenes work you guys do to keep us up and safe and secure.
Thank you so much, Kelly. Thanks for having us
absolutely.
on.
Thank you so much.